Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Is returning from a business trip earlier than usual a good idea or not? Today's story with a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. My second nightmare began with a phone call from my mother. Not surprising, of course, she always seems to end up at the center of all the troubles that happen to me. During my engagement, my mom was one of the people who insisted I forgive Jenny after she lied about seeing her ex-boyfriend. She loves you, Nikki, and you're lucky to have her. She's a great girl. Don't let this little incident ruin what you have. Even in the midst of my first nightmare, when it seemed like a mother should be supportive, she insisted it was partly my fault. That Jenny wouldn't have done this without a reason, that nothing was as it seemed, blah, blah, blah. Thanks, Mom. So, back to the second nightmare. It all started with a phone call from my mother. The call came on Saturday around 11:15, just as I returned from karate class. I was drenched in sweat, dreaming of a shower and lunch, but instead I got hit with a bell. Hey, Mickey, it's me. How are you, baby? I sighed. My mom loved to talk, and I knew I'd be stuck in the kitchen until the sweat on my back dried. Hey, Mom, I'm fine. How are you? She chatted for a few minutes about Naomi, her hip problems, the neighbor's dog that barks all night, and the rising taxes on her house. I listened with half an ear, sipping my beer, waiting for her to get to the point. When she finally did, I regretted picking up the phone. Nikki, I wanted to talk to you about Jenny. She paused, but I was too stunned to respond, so she continued. She called me last night, and we talked for a long time. She really wants to see you, but she's afraid to call you, so she asked me for advice. This time, I found my voice. Well, she must be afraid to talk to me. I have nothing to say to her, and I don't want to hear anything she might say. Don't be like that, honey. I know she hurt you, but it was a long time ago. What are you talking about? Hurt me? Do you think that word covers what she did? And it wasn't that long ago, it was 7 months ago. Trust me, I won't soon forget how much time has passed. Nikki, don't you dare raise your voice at me. I sighed, took the phone away from my mouth, and waited. I told her she should just call you. I'm sure you'll be fair and give her a chance to say what she wants. That's right, Mom. I'll be as fair to her as she was to me. Suddenly, I couldn't take it anymore. Listen, Mom, I need to end this conversation. We'll talk soon. I hung up before she could respond. Jesus Christ, Jenny wants to see me, how cute. How incredibly cute. I knew it wouldn't end. I knew my mother and I knew Jenny well. Once, I thought I knew Jenny, but now I wasn't sure if I knew her at all. The Jenny I thought I loved had nothing in common with the one who had broken my heart. The next week, my mother called 3 more times about the same thing, and a letter arrived from Jenny. Seeing her familiar handwriting sent a shock through me, like I had just downed 6 cups of espresso. My heart pounded, and I wanted to punch something. I tossed the envelope straight into the trash and went outside to do some exercises. It took almost an hour to calm down. A week later, when I got home from work, there was a message on my answering machine from Jenny. Expecting nothing, I pressed play, reaching for a drink from the refrigerator. Hearing her voice left me too stunned to move. Hi Nikki, this is Jenny. I sent you a letter last week, hope you received it. I was hoping. At that point, I lunged for the answering machine like it was a snake and hit the delete button. I probably pressed it 6 times, poking at it like I was trying to destroy something. Another rush of adrenaline, another pounding heart. Why won't this leave me alone? I ran upstairs, changed clothes, and went to karate class. I decided not to answer the phone and let the machine filter my calls. Over the next 10 days, Jenny left 3 more messages, as well as a couple from my mother and one from her friend Angela, a bridesmaid at our wedding. I always liked Angela, but as soon as I heard her message, I deleted it too. It was getting out of control. Almost every day, I came home to a full answering machine, filled with messages that made me anxious and upset. I chose a time when I knew Jenny would be at work and left a message on her home answering machine. I wrote it in advance, keeping it as short as possible. This is Nick. I don't want to see or hear from you. Please don't call, write, or come by. I knew it wouldn't work, of course. 2 days later, my mother left me a message. How could you be so harsh to Jenny? She called me in tears about your message. Do you even have any feelings for her? Yes, I had feelings for her. I wished I didn't, but they were there. I imagined her struggling, calling for help while I stayed safely away, holding the rope and watching her suffer. My mother left me another message asking me to come on Sunday to help her rearrange the furniture and have lunch. She was still living in the house where I grew up, and it was becoming harder for her to manage alone. So, I rearranged the sofa, 2 chairs, the TV stand, and the lamps. She fed me tuna salad sandwiches and fussed over me. I waited for the conversation to shift, knowing she would bring up Jenny. As I munched on a brownie, I looked out the window and saw Jenny's green Jetta pull up to the house. "Excuse me for a moment, Mom," I said, and headed to the bathroom in the back. As my mom walked to the front door to let Jenny in, I quietly slipped out of the kitchen and sat in my car in the driveway. As soon as the front door closed behind them, I started the car and drove away. 2 hours later, I called my mother. When she answered, I didn't say hello. I simply said, "If you do something like this again, it will be the last time you see me," and hung up. Davis was sitting in the kitchen with me, sipping a beer. He had been my closest friend since high school, my best man at my wedding to Jenny, and my regular karate partner. His real name was Brandon Edward Davidson, but everyone just called him Davis. I told him about Jenny trying to contact me, and the look on his face was hard to describe, like someone swallowing something unpleasant. "Damn, Nick, what did you tell her?" I explained my battles with my mother, all the deleted messages, and how I left a message on Jenny's answering machine. I sighed. "You understand what's coming next, right? Jenny will never give this up. Short of a restraining order, I don't see any way to get rid of her. Do you have any idea what she wants?" "I have no idea. I just know that whatever it is, it can't be good. Every time I hear her voice or see her handwriting, my blood pressure spikes. I swear, I've thought about quitting my job and moving somewhere else." "Yeah, but she'd probably find you even if you moved to the ends of the earth. She's relentless." We sat in silence for a long moment. Then he said, "Don't be mad, okay? Just listen to me. What if you agree to meet her, and when she comes, I'll be here with you? I don't want to see her, Davis. I don't want to hear her voice or even think about her." "I know, dude. But you just said she'd never let it go. Why not just get it over with?" I sighed, unhappy. "Let me think about it, okay? You're probably right, 1 bad hour, and maybe I can get rid of her." The following Saturday, I watched from the kitchen window as Jenny walked up to the house in a yellow summer dress that had always been one of my favorites. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't even think about her without feeling a storm of emotions. She was still absolutely beautiful, my dream woman. Small and slender with blue eyes and gorgeous blonde hair that fell below her shoulders. When the door opened, she said, "Hi, honey." "I'm so..." Davis looked stunned. "Yes, it's me," he said in an unfriendly tone, holding the door for her to enter the house. I thought Nick might need a little support. He motioned her to a chair in the living room. I took a deep breath and walked out of the kitchen with 3 glasses of water on a tray. I had worked out earlier that morning and practiced breathing exercises. I was determined to stay calm, even if it killed me. My heart pounded in my chest. "Hi, Jenny," I said quietly, placing the glass in front of her. She gave me a beaming smile and said, "It's so great to see you again, honey." I didn't react at all, trying to keep my face calm. This was her moment, let's just get this over with. Undeterred, she said, "Actually, I was hoping we could talk privately." "I don't think so, Jenny. Davis is a good friend. Whatever you want to say, you can say it in his presence." She hesitated for a moment but then pulled herself together. "Okay, if that's what you want." I watched as she tried to adopt a serious expression. "What do you want, Jenny? I understand that I made a terrible mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. I'm so sorry, honey. I want to come home. I only love you, and I want us to be together. I felt lightheaded. It took all my strength to keep a straight face. My heart raced, and I swayed slightly. From across the room, Davis spoke up. You really have some nerve, don't you? After everything you put Nick through, you think you can just walk in here and pretend nothing happened? His voice was calm but cold. After what you did, you think you can just come here like it's all fine? That's not how this works. I stayed silent, unsure if I could remain standing. Jenny looked genuinely shocked by Davis's words, her face falling into a sad half-smile as she seemed to ignore him and turn to me. I know I was terrible, honey. I really am. You're probably still so mad at me. That's enough, Jenny. Just stop. I stood up slowly and walked back to the kitchen, leaving a heavy silence behind me. I turned on the cold water and splashed it over my face and neck, trying to clear my head. My thoughts were chaotic. This felt like a cruel joke. Someone decided I hadn't suffered enough and was ready to hurt me again. I thought I had gotten through the worst of it, but I was clearly wrong. In that moment, I learned something I didn't want to know, that you can hate someone and still love them at the same time. I hated Jenny more than I had ever hated anyone, yet my heart was racing at the thought of her wanting to come back. It was a revelation that confirmed I was in the midst of my second nightmare. I took a few deep breaths and walked back into the living room. Jenny and Davis sat in intense silence, both looking at me. Jenny, you need to leave, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. Right now. You've said what you wanted to say, and I don't want to see or hear from you anymore. I don't see how I can express this more clearly. I watched as her face crumpled, tears beginning to flow. I know I messed up, but I thought we... Her voice trailed off into sobs. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned away and said, Davis, can you help Jenny get to her car? Sure, dude, he replied. Without another word, I headed toward the stairs, slowly making my way to my bedroom, listening to Jenny's desperate cries behind me. Nick, please! I sat on the bed feeling numb, listening for the sound of the front door closing, then waiting for Jenny's car to drive away. Finally, I heard it and went downstairs, collapsing on the sofa. Davis returned and sat down in the chair opposite me. Lord, she doesn't get it at all, does she? He said, shaking his head in disbelief. Davis, I said, seeing the tears on my face, I'm so messed up. What do you mean, dude? I mean, I love her. I love her madly. Can you believe it? I still want her back. I burst into tears, the first time in my life I had cried in front of another man. Even at my father's funeral, I had managed to keep it together until I was alone. I was sure it was awkward for Davis, but he was a true friend. He sat next to me, put a hand on my shoulder, and held it while I cried like a child. I'm telling you about my second nightmare, but what about the first one? You're probably wondering what happened to me. I guess I'll have to share my first nightmare. It won't be much fun, though. There's a famous story about a rich guy who was asked how he ended up bankrupt. His answer was, gradually, then suddenly. That's exactly how my first nightmare unfolded, though I didn't see the gradual part. It happened behind my back. I had several girlfriends before I met Jenny, but she outshone them all. She was wonderful, funny, attentive, affectionate, honest, and she loved me. I felt like I had won the lottery. This was a girl who belonged with someone exceptional, not an average 24-year-old electrical engineer from Dayton, Ohio. We dated for almost 2 years before I found the courage to ask her to marry me. Even then, after we'd been intimate for over a year, I was terrified she would say no. But she didn't. She screamed, grabbed the ring, and put it on her finger, then hugged and kissed me loudly in the restaurant, drawing applause from other diners. The classic elements: church, wedding dress, bouquet toss, honeymoon in Maui, and then we settled into a cozy 3-room house and lived happily ever after. Well, maybe not completely happy, but for about 4 years. It wasn't perfect. One issue was that Jenny loved to have fun. She loved to dance and generally preferred a more active social life than I did. A club night every couple of weeks was enough for me, while she preferred to go a couple of times a week. But we compromised. Sometimes I was understanding and we went clubbing with a few of her friends, and other times she understood and we stayed in to watch a movie. The great thing was that both nights often ended with us being intimate. I had never been with someone who gave herself so completely to me, who was so open and immersed in the moment. Another issue was my nagging feeling that she was too good for me. How did I end up with someone like her? A guy like me doesn't get a girl like her in real life. It felt like a storybook. But she loved me and showed it constantly, and gradually, my worries faded. As they say, to whom God wants to harm, he first calms his worries. Or if it's not a saying, it should be. This began about 4 months before everything changed. Of course, I had no idea at the time. Most of what I learned later came as a shock. While all this was happening, I hardly noticed anything, like a classic oblivious husband. When we went out, Jenny almost always danced with other guys. Sometimes I danced with other women, but mostly I preferred to relax with a drink and watch her. Jenny was so beautiful on the dance floor that there were always guys vying for her attention. One night, a charming guy danced with her several times, but I didn't think much of it at the time. The rest of the evening was completely normal. Jenny slow danced with me and hugged me tightly. We returned home as we often did after nights out. It turned out this guy's name was Alec. The name alone raised my suspicions. Most guys named Alexander prefer to be called Alex, but this guy insisted on Alec, like he thought it made him special. He seemed to find Jenny incredibly attractive, which was certainly true, and he didn't care that she was married. He learned her last name and where she worked through her friends, and then he started pursuing her. Alec was an actor, not particularly famous, but he had done some commercials in Chicago and had a flexible schedule. He checked out where Jenny worked, discovered where her coworkers went for lunch, and managed to bump into her about a week after they had danced together at the club. He approached her casually, as if it were a coincidence. Jenny invited him to sit at her table with her friends, and he concocted an excuse for being in the area. That's how it all began, and you can probably guess the rest. The only real question was how easy or difficult it was for him to get close to her, and I still don't know the answer. If it was hard and she was trying to be faithful, then he likely took his time, with casual meetings leading to dinner invitations. If it was easy, then maybe she was showing interest from the start. Regardless, he won her over. Whether it took 3 weeks or 10, the outcome was the same. But I bet what surprised Alec was that Jenny ended up developing feelings for him, or at least thought she did. Who really knows what was going on in her mind? I once thought I understood her. I have no doubt that Alec was only thinking about being with an attractive woman he met at a club, and since Jenny was an incredible lover, it was no surprise that once was not enough for him. But for Jenny, it became something deeper, hearts and flowers, a connection she felt was meant to be. In fact, she likely felt that way even before they became intimate. I don't see Jenny as someone who cheats coldly, just because she was attracted to someone and decided to explore a new experience. Although I guess the last few months have shown me how little I knew my own wife, so why should you believe anything I say? In any case, it's said that for women, purely physical attraction rarely leads to infidelity, and I suspect Jenny genuinely believed his words and thought she loved him before she allowed him to get close. Things escalated, and Jenny became emotionally invested. I don't know what Alec truly told her, nor whether he actually believed he loved her, but he certainly didn't discourage her or slow down their encounters. She began seeing him more frequently, arranging long lunches or appointments during work hours so they could spend time together. For her, it wasn't just physical, it became a relationship with someone she felt was the love of her life. They must have made plans together, when she would tell me, when she would move in with him, all the financial arrangements. All of this was happening gradually, and I was oblivious. Even looking back, I can't say I would have noticed anything amiss. Jenny was sweet and affectionate at home. We still went out as much as before, and we were still intimate as we had been. One night, I came home to dinner and saw Jenny was crying. Concerned, I asked her about it, trying to console her. She only mentioned that a coworker was very ill, being vague in her explanation. I didn't press her, and only after everything unraveled did I remember that moment. Jenny probably felt guilty about how her actions would affect me. I'd like to think she felt at least a little ashamed. This gradual buildup led to a sudden shift. I had a 2-day training session in Cleveland, nearly 4 hours away, and planned to stay overnight. On the first day, the evening session was canceled, and since I didn't need to be back until late the next day, I decided to surprise Jenny and come home. It was a long drive, but I truly loved her. I bought beautiful flowers in Cleveland, left around 6:30, and reached our house around 10:15. I noticed a car parked out front, but I didn't think much of it. Cars were often parked along our street. I really hate being in the center of such a cliché scenario, even though that doesn't make it any less painful. Most of what I'm recounting now is what I replayed in my mind later, unable to shake the memory. I entered the house and walked up the stairs to our bedroom. The door was wide open. When I stepped into the room, I froze. The soft glow of candles illuminated the space, and there lay Alec and Jenny, both without anything, dozing in our bed. He was propped against the pillows on my side, and she hugging him. The room smelled of candles and intimacy. I never found out if they were winding down or had just finished, but it hardly mattered. In moments like this, I tend to freeze or move slowly instead of acting on impulse. I wish I could say I confronted him right then, but to my eternal shame, I simply dropped the flowers and asked in a quiet, stunned voice, "What's going on here?" Their eyes widened in surprise at my presence. In that moment, I replayed the scene over and over in my mind. Alec's expression turned smug, like he relished the situation. But I didn't focus on him, I looked at Jenny. After the initial shock, she pulled the sheet up to cover herself and looked at me with a soft, almost pitying gaze. "Nick, I didn't mean for it to be like this," she said. Notice what she didn't say. She didn't apologize or try to downplay it. She just calmly addressed me. Then, without any sign of fear or embarrassment, she turned to Alec and said, "You should go. I'll talk to you tomorrow," smiling at him. Alec, that arrogant man, got out of bed, dressed, and left the room without a second thought. Meanwhile, I stood there, frozen in shock, like Wile E. Coyote teetering over the edge of a cliff, unaware of the fall ahead. Neither Jenny nor I moved until we heard the front door open and close. Then she said, still so calm and sympathetic, "We need to talk. Let me take a quick shower, and we can talk downstairs, okay?" She got out of bed, wrapping the sheets around herself. Why? Because I wasn't supposed to see her like that anymore after 4 years of marriage. She didn't want me to see the physical marks left by Alec. I had no idea what to think, and I walked out of the room straight into the bathroom, closing the door behind me. A moment later, I heard the water in the shower turn on. There were many things I could have done in that moment, and you might think I was foolish for not acting on any of them. I could have jumped in the shower and confronted her, or thrown all her clothes out the window, or even driven back to Cleveland. I could have gone to a bar and drunk until I couldn't feel anymore. But at that moment, none of those options crossed my mind. I realized that if I left, I'd be leaving her alone to be with him for at least another 24 hours. Although I was stunned and paralyzed, I still needed to find out what was happening. I knew what was going on. This actor had my wife in her bed. But I needed to understand more: how long, why, and what was next. I wasn't angry yet, it just hadn't hit me. That day, I learned that you can see something with your own eyes and still struggle to accept it, at least not right away. So, I went downstairs, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the wall, not thinking about anything. Within 20 minutes, I couldn't form a single coherent thought until Jenny walked into the room, looking fresh from her shower, wrapped in a yellow terry robe, her damp hair fragrant and shiny. If I hadn't been so dazed, that's when I would have started crying or shouting. Instead, we sat down for the most surreal conversation of my life. "Nick, I'm so sorry you had to see that. I didn't expect you back until tomorrow," she said. "What happened? Does it matter?" I pointed to the flowers I had brought her, now lying abandoned on the kitchen table. She looked down for a moment, then back up at me. "I never expected this to happen. I was going to talk to you about it tomorrow night when you got back from your trip." "What should we talk about?" "The fact that you're seeing someone else?" "That's very considerate of you, Jenny," I replied. She grimaced and shook her head. "No, Nick, it's not like that. It's not like that at all." She looked at me earnestly and reached across the table to take my hand. "I can't believe it, but Alec and we're in love. Really in love, and he's the man I want to spend my life with. I'm so sorry." "What?" I looked at her in disbelief. "You're in love with someone else? What are you saying?" "I didn't want this to happen, I swear," she said, her voice softening. but he's everything I've ever wanted in a man." She must have seen the shock and pain on my face and hurried to continue. "Oh, honey, don't take it that way. You are wonderful to me, so reliable and loving, but our life together, it's ordinary. It's stable, good, and reliable, but with Alec, it's magical. He's exciting, wild, unpredictable. Every moment with him is like a roller coaster ride. I've never felt like this before. Nick, I have to be with him. I was going to tell you tomorrow and move in with him on Saturday. I guess I'll have to speed things up. Jenny, I can't believe this. How did this happen? How long has this been going on?" "It's not like that," she replied sharply, then calmed down. "We first met at the club about 4 months ago. We danced a few times, nothing more, and then we randomly met for lunch a couple of times. After that, we started having lunch together alone, and it was incredible. We have so much in common. It's like we were meant for each other." I looked at her, desperately trying to process what she was saying. "And you're telling me you're leaving me for him?" She nodded, still holding my hand. "Yes, honey. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you." Then her expression shifted again, that frustrating look that made me want to shake her. But that's what had to happen. Alec and we sat in silence for a while after that. She probably looked at me with sympathy, thinking of how much I was hurting. What was happening to me was so far beyond anything I could have imagined that it left me numb. Finally, I said, "What about the vows we made to each other? You know, to love, respect, and cherish one another? Were you just joking? Were you keeping your fingers crossed behind your back?" Her face took on a pained but patient look, like a mother talking to a challenging child. "Nick, I meant every word. I thought we'd be together forever. This is as much of a shock to me as it is to you. I didn't plan for this. I didn't want it, it just happened. And if it changes anything, I'm really, really sorry. I know it's unfair to you." A little more silence hung in the air. I still felt numb, as if my senses were dulled, like my head was filled with cotton. A few minutes later, I suddenly stood up and poured myself a glass of water. Still standing at the sink, not looking at her, I said, "I'm going back to Cleveland. I'd like you and your things to be gone by the time I get back tomorrow." I felt a desperate urge to leave the house, to get out of her sight. I think I realized I was on the verge of losing control. I vaguely heard her say, "Okay, honey," as I hurried toward the door without looking back. I drove just 4 blocks before the tears overtook me, and I had to pull over. I cried and sobbed, hit the dashboard, kicked the floor, and generally acted like a child throwing a tantrum. This lasted about 10 minutes, a mix of anger, pain, and sadness. When it passed, I wiped my face, started the car, and drove back to Cleveland. Amazingly, I managed to do so without crashing into anyone or anything along the way. When I got there, it was already past 2:30 a.m., and I immediately fell into bed and was able to sleep. The next day was a blur. I was in a sort of daze during the sessions, unable to recall any details. I drove slowly back to Dayton. There was no need to rush. Her things were gone, along with her cosmetics, purses, and a few of our CDs. She left none of the furniture or stereo equipment. I assumed she moved in with Alec, though she hadn't said so, and she didn't take a single photo, not one of the many pictures of us, including our wedding and honeymoon, displayed throughout the house. I don't know why she did it, but she left me a note, a single sentence that hardly warranted the time it took to write it. "Nick, I'm so sorry. I'll always look out for you. Jenny." So, this was my first nightmare. Enough details for you, I hope, because I can't share anything more except perhaps some consequences you might be interested in. My emotional recovery grew slowly and unevenly as the shock wore off. It was starting to feel more real. My beloved wife, the love of my life, left me for another man. From the first night, I knew I could never sleep in our bedroom again after what I'd seen. Without hesitation, I moved my things into the guest bedroom. The double bed there suited me well. It wasn't until Sunday afternoon that I walked back into our bedroom and looked around. In my mind, I still saw the two of them there, the room lit by candles, the lingering scent in the air. But all of that faded. Jenny had changed the sheets, remade the bed, and put away the candles. Everything looked as if nothing had happened. Then, I lost it a little. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I think it was part of how I coped. The clean, untouched appearance of the bedroom angered me. I wanted to see it as it was. I started to feel really angry and began to cry. I took out the candles, placed them on the bedside tables, and lit them. I made the bed, pulled down the top sheet, and arranged the pillows as they had been. How did I survive those first few weeks? I went to work, returned home, and didn't tell anyone what happened except Davis. He came to see me one Saturday afternoon. I sat him down with a beer and told him the whole story, every word I could remember. He looked at me in shock, shaking his head, muttering, "Jesus Christ," several times. When I finished, he was still there, shaking his head. Finally, he said slowly, "And she thinks she loves this guy?" "That's what she says. He's the love of her life, the one she's been waiting for, even if she didn't know it before." "And you? You're just Mr. Reliable, the boring one she only thought she loved." We sat in silence for a while, and he said, "I was wondering what you were going to do, but it's too early for that. How about we go hit some golf balls?" That's how Davis helped me get through it. We hit golf balls, watched football on TV, and sparred. We drank beer, although I never got completely drunk, which was strange. I never wanted to. We talked a lot during those first few weeks about Jenny and me and what I wanted to do next. Sometimes we talked about him and Kathleen, the woman he dated occasionally. I decided to leave the house. I could afford the mortgage on my salary and didn't want to move, but I chose not to file for divorce. If she wanted to marry this guy, she could file and pay a lawyer. It didn't matter to me. I closed all my credit cards and got several new ones. Talking to Davis also helped me realize I needed to keep busy, to find ways to avoid sitting at home alone, staring at walls. I had practiced karate for years, reaching the brown belt level, but it had become just a hobby. Now, I got serious about it, started going to classes 4 or 5 times a week, and did additional sparring in my yard. Karate was perfect. It forced me to focus and be disciplined, concentrating solely on what I was doing. The 90-minute sessions were like oases, free from any thoughts of Jenny. And what a great outlet for my frustration. Punching, kicking, whether at an opponent or into the void, I can't tell you how many times I imagined Alex Smugface as my target. When I reached the 4th level of black belt, I started breaking boards with my hand. It was incredibly satisfying. So now you know what I know, and for me, that was far more than enough to make me miserable, but nowhere near enough to really understand it. I mean, how can a woman who is happily married fall in love with another man? I know this happens, but how? Jenny wasn't unhappy with me, and I still don't believe she was searching for someone. But that guy Alec found his way in and somehow made her believe they were meant to be together, like some tragic love story. 8 months had passed, and I was starting to feel a little better, thinking the worst was over and I could start envisioning a new life without Jenny. Now she was telling me she wanted to get back with me. I really hoped that after the day Jenny came to me, this would be the end of it. I listened to what she wanted and gave her my answer. I didn't let her talk too much, but who cares, right? Less than a week passed before my mother began to put pressure on me again. I didn't pick up the phone at all, so all communication was through messages. "She's sorry for what she did, Nick. She really is. You should hear her talk about you. You should give her another chance." That was the basic idea, although my mother found different ways to express it. I called her on Saturday morning before I left for karate, so she couldn't keep me on the phone for long. "Mom, it's me. Please listen to me, okay? I am not, repeat not, going back to Jenny. It's over. Thinking about her, talking about her, seeing her, it all just makes me feel worse. You are my mother, and you should be on my side, right? So please don't mention Jenny again." After a long pause, she said in an offended voice, "Of course I'm on your side, Nick. It's just that Jenny is." I interrupted her and hung up. My mother would never understand. The next week was good, mainly because of karate. I was training for an amateur tournament in Columbus, so after each regular practice, I had an hour of extra training. My instructor pushed me to the point of exhaustion. I would come home feeling drained but happy, eat dinner, watch a game with Davis, or read, then go to bed. On Saturday, when I returned from karate around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Jenny's friend Angela was sitting on the porch of my house. For a moment, I thought about driving past, but then I decided, what the hell, I can't avoid people forever. She smiled as I walked up to her and said, "Hey Nick, can you buy a girl a beer?" "Sure, Angie, if you don't mind having a drink with a sweaty guy." She smiled back. We went inside and drank beer, chatting about nothing in particular. I've always liked Angela. She was a short, curvy brunette, the polar opposite of Jenny, but like Jenny, she was outgoing and fun-loving. In the beginning of our marriage, Jenny and I hoped that maybe Angie and Davis would get together because we liked both of them, but it never worked out. They teased each other in a friendly way but never actually dated. I didn't mind Angela being there. She was funny and a joy to be around. But I couldn't help but wonder if this unexpected meeting would lead to a conversation about Jenny. When we finished the beer, I said, "So, as nice as it is to see you, Angie, there must be a reason you came. Care to tell me what it is?" She blushed and looked down for a minute. "You probably think it's because of Jenny, Nick, but it's not. I care about you too. You know, I always thought we were friends too, not just because of Jenny. I missed you when she left. I felt like I had to stay away out of loyalty to her or something. But now I'm thinking, darn it, Nick is my friend too. Why can't I see him?" I looked at her suspiciously. "So it's really not about Jenny? You're not going to tell me I have to reach out to her?" Angela looked a little unsure but held my gaze and said, "No, Nick, that's not the point. I was just hoping we could spend time together like we used to." I won't say that I believed her, I'm just not that gullible anymore. But I didn't press further. "Okay, Angie, I'll take a quick shower, and then we can go get lunch." It was the start of a very strange but genuinely enjoyable few weeks. Angela came to see me twice more the following week, and we also went to dinner and a movie the weekend after that. As promised, she didn't mention Jenny, didn't pry into my feelings or ask about my current personal life. Instead, we acted like friends, much like I did with Davis, probably, except Angela was prettier and had a lovely scent. Angie loved baseball, so we watched some games on TV, and at her request, I showed her some of the advanced karate moves I was learning. I told her about the upcoming tournament and shared random things about work, which she found interesting. We also talked about her job and her family life growing up. We got to know each other better, and I gradually became a bit less skeptical. No, that's not quite right. I was becoming less suspicious that Angie was trying to convince me to reconcile with Jenny, but at the same time, I started to wonder what her intentions were if not that. I loved spending time with Angie, but why was she so eager to be around me? What made it complicated was her beauty and charm. She looked great, smelled wonderful, and truly enjoyed my company. I hadn't been with a woman in almost 10 months, and I began to realize that my feelings for her were more than just friendship. But I wasn't sure if they were purely physical attraction or something deeper. Before I could process my feelings and figure out what to do with them, everything took an unexpected turn. Angie invited me to dinner at her apartment on Friday night, and I assumed it would be a casual meal like we'd had several times before. But when I arrived, the table was set with a tablecloth and candles, the lights were dim, and Angie looked stunning. No jeans or sweater, she wore a short black skirt, tights, and a pale blue sweater that hugged her form. Her hair cascaded over her shoulders. "Oh my God, Angie, you look amazing. Are we going to some party you forgot to mention? If so, you're going to have to fend off the guys with a stick." She blushed and looked pleased but said, "Thanks, Nick. I just wanted to dress up a little today, that's all." At first, I felt uneasy, convinced that something was off. I found it hard to believe that the most obvious explanation, that Angela was trying to seduce me, was true. We chatted nervously for a few minutes but soon relaxed, ate dinner, and enjoyed each other's company. Usually, we preferred beer, but today she brought a bottle of red wine, one of those fancy bottles that liquor store employees always try to sell you. I thought it was great, though I'm far from a connoisseur. After dinner, we washed the dishes together, as always, and I noticed that Angie was standing very close, brushing her thigh against mine as if nothing was happening. Then she led me into the living room, turned on some music, and sat down next to me on the sofa. I realized I had to say something, so I just went ahead. "Angela, I'm happy to be here, but I need to know what's going on. We've just been friends for weeks, but this. I watched her carefully. She looked nervous but determined. The kiss was incredible, and I had no intention of interrupting it. When she pulled away, she smiled shyly and leaned in to kiss me again. As I said, Angie is stunningly beautiful and has an amazing figure, and I hadn't been with a woman for a long time. I felt an increasing affection and attraction toward her. We had a romantic candlelit dinner and plenty of wine, and I was swept away in the moment. I can't say that I didn't think about Jenny at all. I knew all too well that the only other woman I'd been this close to in years was Jenny. Even in my excitement with Angie, thoughts of my wife lingered in the back of my mind. But on the other hand, those thoughts didn't torment me. I was focused on Angie and the fun we were having together. I was looking forward to what might come next. So imagine my surprise, though I don't usually like cliches, this one fits perfectly, when Angie suddenly pulled away and looked at me with a sad expression, tears filling her eyes. Before I could say a word, she was already on her feet, looking down at me. "Nick, I'm so sorry. I can't do this." Confused and thinking I must have missed something, I stood up and said that. "It's okay, Angie. Sorry, we probably went too fast." "No," she exclaimed, moving away from me. "No, Nick, it's not you. It's not what you did, it's me. I never intended to." She started to cry, looking at me through her tears. "Can you just leave, please?" "I'm so sorry," she said, crying harder and covering her face with her hands as she stood in the middle of the living room. I tried to hug her again, wanting to comfort her, but she shook her head sharply and ran into the bathroom, locking the door. Not knowing what to do, I waited for a few minutes. When she didn't come out, I walked to the door, knocked softly, and said, "I'm really sorry, Angie. I'm leaving now, okay?" Her timid voice came from behind the door. "Yes, Nick. I'm sorry. It's all my fault." Completely puzzled, I put on my coat and went home. Davis was in the living room when I got back. "I don't know, man," he said. "It doesn't really make sense to me either." "She didn't explain anything to you?" I shook my head. "All I can guess is that we moved too fast or that she feels some strange loyalty to Jenny. But what really frustrates me is that she doesn't want to talk about it. I've left her about 10 messages this week, being careful not to press too hard, you know? But she never called me back. Damn, Davis, I don't deserve this." He smiled at me, raising an eyebrow. "Ah, no one deserves this, and B, you deserve better, like a parade of women who all want you and none of whom are complicated." I snorted. "I've never seen one of those, let alone a parade." "What are you going to do?" "Nothing for now," I said. "I have a tournament at the end of next week, and I don't want to embarrass myself. When I get back, maybe I can get Angie to talk to me and find out what's really going on." I won 5 out of 8 matches and finished 9th in my category. Aside from being completely exhausted, I felt pretty good coming back from Columbus. I had a busy weekend where I just ate, slept, and practiced karate, which was great. For the first time since Jenny left, I felt like I had a chance to pull my life back together. "This is great, man." Davis congratulated me when I called him. "And think about how much of a weakling you were just a few months ago. Even I could have beaten you." Laughing, I said, "Yeah, 2 times out of 10. Whenever you want to try again, let me know." "No way, buddy. Now that you're a black belt, you'd make a fool of me. But I can still outdrink you." We exchanged some friendly banter before ending the call, and I thanked the universe once again for having such a wonderful friend, especially over the past year. A couple of days later, I decided to visit Angela after work and persuade her to meet with me. After all, she was the one who had left me in this situation, and I was tired of leaving phone messages that went unanswered. I rang the doorbell of her apartment and waited. A moment later, I heard her footsteps. She probably looked through the peephole. "Sorry, Nick. I can't see you," her voice sounded a little muffled through the door. "Well then, Angie, I guess I'm in for a long night. I brought a folding chair, and I'm going to sit here in the hallway until you let me in and talk to me." If you pass by in the morning, I'll be here again tomorrow when you get back from work. You'll have to get used to seeing me every day." There was a long pause, an agonizingly long pause. Then I heard the chain being removed, and she opened the door. She was wearing jeans and a black t-shirt, barefoot and probably just having taken off her makeup. She looked like she was about to cry, and she was absolutely beautiful. I realized I hadn't seen her for almost a month, and my heart started beating faster. How about that? It's not Jenny that makes my heart race. "Angie, you need to talk to me. I don't know what happened or what I did wrong, but please give me another chance. You're important to me. Can you imagine what it's like to feel abandoned after everything with Jenny?" "I'm really sorry, Nick. I guess I didn't think of it that way. Come in and take that chair with you," she added with a small smile. She brought us a couple of sodas, and we sat in the living room, me on the couch and her in the chair opposite me. "All I ask, Angie, is that you tell me what went wrong. Was it me? Did I do something to upset you?" She shook her head vigorously. "No, nothing like that. It's not you, Nick. You didn't do anything wrong. I always felt good with you." She leaned forward. "What I have to tell you is a long story, okay? And it will be difficult for me, so you have to promise to listen until the end and not get so angry that you leave." I had never seen her look so serious. "I promise, Angie, although I can tell from your face that I won't like it." "No, you won't like it," she said, looking out the window for a moment before turning back to me. "Nick, Jenny is at the center of this, and there's no way around it. If you want to hear the truth, you're going to have to hear about her too." I wouldn't say I was happy about this. In fact, I felt my stomach drop, but I just nodded and waited for her to continue. What followed was yet another version of a painful saga, as if I hadn't suffered enough already. Angela walked me through Jenny's relationship with Alec, though she didn't call it that. She explained that Jenny really fell for him and thought he was the one with whom she would find happiness. Initially, everything with Alec seemed much more exciting than life with me. How could it be otherwise? He was a charming actor, loved to dance, and enjoyed late-night parties. His lifestyle was hard to compare to any married couple's routine. But Alec turned out to be quite problematic. This wasn't a surprise to me. He was hyperactive, emotional, and unstable, especially when using substances, which was often. He couldn't stick to any schedule, often failed to be where he said he would be, and became aggressive towards Jenny during his wild mood swings. Angela explained that at first, it wasn't that bad, just random shouting. Sometimes, Jenny would hide in the bathroom with the door locked to escape him. But after a few months, their arguments escalated to the point where he physically hurt her several times, and Jenny would come to Angela's house terrified. Jenny eventually realized that she had fallen in love with a fantasy and that married life had become a bit dull. She mistakenly attributed that boredom to me, not recognizing that no marriage could compete with the allure of something new. It dawned on her what a terrible mistake it was to think she could find fulfillment with someone so immature. "Good for her," I interrupted bitterly. I sat quietly, listening to Angela's story as I had promised, but it became increasingly difficult. I was ready to break down. Angela noticed and said softly, "Nick, you promised." I nodded and tried to relax. It had to be nearing the end, I kept telling myself. So, Jenny moved out of Alec's place and rented her own apartment. Then she started reaching out to my mother, trying to get in touch with me again. I thought I knew the rest of the story, but of course, there was more to come that I wasn't prepared for. Angela sat next to me and took my hand. "Nick, please don't be upset with me. I may have made some bad choices, but I did it because I cared about both you and Jenny." I looked at her with concern. "What now?" "After breaking up with Alec, Jenny was determined to win you back. She believed that if you would give her a chance to explain, she could show how much she loved you and that she would do anything to make things right. When you finally saw her that day and told her to leave, she was heartbroken. She cried for weeks, and I was genuinely worried she might do something drastic. I thought it might be better that way, but I realized that if Jenny had harmed herself, it would have caused a lifetime of guilt, even if it was entirely her fault. I was relieved that she at least spared me that horror. Jenny kept thinking there had to be a way for you to understand so she could have another chance. We talked about it for hours. I listened patiently as she went over everything again, and then she came up with this idea. Angela squeezed my hand tighter. Nick, you have to promise me that you won't react too strongly, okay? I nodded, gritting my teeth. The last bit of information was overwhelming, as my teenage niece likes to say, and I wasn't looking forward to what was next. Jenny thought that if you had a romantic encounter too, it would be easier for you to forgive her. But she knew from your mom that you weren't seeing anyone at all, so one evening she came to me and asked, no, she begged me, to help her win you back. I let go of Angela's hand and jumped to my feet, staring at her. So that's what all those weeks were about? Just being friends and having fun, and then this? No, Nick, please let me finish. I was furious. I've had enough of being deceived. Angela shouted, tears streaming down her face. You promised. I was seething, but I closed my mouth and sat in a chair as far from her as I could manage, waiting for her to continue. I told her it was a terrible idea. It would be unfair to you to take advantage of your pain. And the thought of deceiving you felt wrong. You were my friend, and I told her it would never work. But she pleaded with me, she knelt down and cried, saying this was her only chance to get you back, and I was her best friend. She had no one else to turn to. And, Nick, I knew how much you loved her, or at least how much you did before. You were always so taken with her, so kind. I thought maybe it could work out for you both. So I told her I'd come over and hang out with you for a bit to see how things went, but I didn't promise anything. Angela's voice became very quiet. Part of the problem was that I was so drawn to you. I never thought of you that way. Ever since I met you, you were Jenny's boyfriend, and the three of us have always been close friends. But after your breakup, I couldn't help but wonder how things would be between us. So I came to you, and we started hanging out. Nick, we had fun. Nothing romantic happened, and I kept telling myself I was doing this for Jenny. I wanted to take it slow, to prepare the ground and not rush. I didn't want to ruin anything. But the truth is, I started developing feelings for you. Her voice softened. I just loved being around you, those casual dinners, watching TV together, or whatever we did. I was so happy, Nick, and I didn't know what to do. I wanted it to last, but Jenny was getting more impatient, asking when I was finally going to get closer to you. I felt guilty for not being honest with you or with her. The worst part was, if we did end up together, would you go back to Jenny? I didn't think so, but I had to admit I didn't want that to happen. She looked at me earnestly. Here I am, Jenny insists that I get closer to you, but I genuinely want you for myself, not for her. You are so kind and cheerful, such a good friend. I started avoiding Jenny's calls because I couldn't tell her the truth, that I wanted you for myself. It was easier to stay silent. That night with the candles and the wine, I decided I was going to take a leap. Later, I would question why I did it, but when we started kissing, I felt an overwhelming desire for you. Damn it, Nick, I wanted you to love me. I still want that, but I made a promise to Jenny, and I knew I was being dishonest with you. Suddenly, it felt like my head was going to explode. I knew it wasn't right, even though I wanted you so badly, and I had to stop. We sat in silence, Angie quietly crying. I clenched my fists so tightly that I was afraid my nails would break the skin. I imagined what Davis would say if you were here, and it almost made me laugh, hearing his voice in my head. Jesus, what a situation. We probably sat in silence for about 5 minutes before I stood up. What a story, Angela. Another chapter in the Chronicles of Nick, led around by women. What's that saying? Same challenges, different day. That fits pretty well. I'm so sorry, Nick, she said, looking down. Me too, Angie. I turned and walked home, carrying my folding chair with me. Davis said, I don't know, man. I need more details. We sat in my yard, each with a bottle of beer. Just answer the question, Davis, is this my third nightmare or just a continuation of the second? I guess it depends. Tell me this, are you more hurt and angry about Jenny's actions because she found a way to mess with your head again, or are you upset because Angie wasn't honest with you? What if I say it's both? That's a cop-out. What really hurts? I thought for a moment. I think it's the Angie part. Believe it or not, the Jenny part isn't as bad because it's exactly what I expected from her. She wants what she wants and doesn't care how she gets it. I stopped valuing her ethical standards a long time ago. I laughed a little. In that case, Davis said, this is definitely your third nightmare because the first two were Jenny's, and this one is Angie's. Glad we cleared that up. Would you like another beer? Of course. Then let's go eat. We devoured a pizza and a half and sat back, relaxed, watching the cute waitress move around the restaurant. So what about Angie now? Have you talked to her? Not once. She's left me a few messages over the past 2 weeks, all unobtrusive, just saying how sorry she is. I just don't feel like calling her back. Why not? I thought for a moment. I think because I don't know what to tell her. Before I call her, I should know how I feel and what I want to achieve. But right now, I have no idea. I mean, she deceived me, didn't she? She played a game like Jenny did. But then again, she stopped. That should count for something. And when I finally got her to talk, she told me the truth, even the parts that reflect badly on her. The thing is, I miss her. I keep thinking about how much fun we had together, not to mention how great she looked in that blue sweater the night we almost connected. I wouldn't have refused to finish what we started, but can I trust her? Is there any reason to believe I can rely on her more than my wife? Davis looked at me. It's time to go, man. When you start talking in circles, I know it's time to take you home. 3 days later, Jenny came to see me, just like that, without warning. Was this nightmare number 4 or just an addendum to the previous 2? By this time, I had lost track. It was about 8:30 p.m., and I was clearing away the dishes from dinner when the doorbell rang. When I opened it, she was standing there. If I hadn't been so surprised, I might have closed the door on her, but instead, I froze. "Hi, Nick," she said in a small voice, almost childlike. "Can I come in and talk to you?" I stepped back silently, allowing her to enter the living room. We sat opposite each other without saying anything. My heart wasn't racing, my palms weren't clammy this time. I felt cold and empty, as if seeing someone from a painful but distant past. I realized I was further along in moving on from Jenny than I had thought. "Would you like something to drink? Coffee?" "A glass of water would be great, thank you." I brought her a glass of water and one for myself. We sat in silence again. I knew one thing, I wasn't going to say a word. She came with a purpose, and I was going to wait to see what it was. "Nick, I haven't seen you in a long time. Not since that day I was here with you and Davis." I remained silent. "I know you've been spending time with Angie, she mentioned it when we talked." She looked at me, clearly hoping I would say something to help her, but I just watched her. But lately, for some reason, Angie hasn't been answering my calls. I don't know what's bothering her or if she's upset with me. Still silent, her gaze became more pleading. "Nick, are you and her a couple, or are you just friends?" I replied slowly, "I don't think that's any of your business, Jenny. You and I aren't together anymore, and what happens in my life is private." She looked offended but nodded. "Yes, I understand." She took a deep breath and continued, "You know why I'm asking, don't you? I still love you, Nick, more than I ever realized. After my mistake with Alec, I had a lot of time to think about everything I lost. All I want is to be with you again. I'll do anything to make it up to you." I realize now how foolish I was. Honestly, I wondered why I felt so dull instead of tense. "Jenny, I'm just not going back to you. You say you've been thinking about your mistake, but I don't think you realize how completely you've hurt me." In that moment, I made a decision. "Come with me. I want to show you something." She looked surprised but followed me upstairs. Soon, we stood in front of the closed door of our old bedroom. The first couple of weeks after you left, I went a little crazy. I moved into the guest room, but I kept coming back here to let my feelings out. Eventually, I just stopped. I haven't been in this room since about 3 weeks after you left, but I think when you see this, you'll understand how your actions affected me. I opened the door and turned on the light, stepping aside to let her enter first. I heard her gasp. "Oh God." The bed was partially dismantled, and the whole room still carried a stale smell. Jenny's red nightie was pinned to one wall, where her heart would have been if she had been wearing it. A steak knife was stuck into the nightie, and the candles from the night I found her with Alec were shattered on the floor. Wax marks showed where I had thrown them against the walls. Pieces of our wedding album were scattered everywhere. I had torn it apart and scattered the pages and photographs around the room. At ankle level, there were deep marks on the walls from where I had kicked them. And on one wall, written in large letters with red lipstick, were the words, "Die." I watched as Jenny took in the ugliness and destruction. When she turned to me, shock on her face, I said, "I bet you didn't know I could get that angry, did you?" "I didn't know either." They say that in stressful times, you learn new things about yourself. Well, I learned how much rage I have inside, ready to be unleashed with enough provocation, and you provided it. There was a sadness on her face that I had never seen before. It felt like she was finally starting to understand how deeply she had hurt me. "Oh, Nick, I'm so sorry, so sorry." She slowly walked toward me, trying to hug me, but I said, "No, Jenny, I don't think it's worth it." Without another word, I turned and walked back downstairs. Almost 10 minutes passed before she came down and sat with me in the living room. "This is really the end, isn't it?" I nodded. "You ended it, and it won't come back." She started crying, her shoulders shaking. A few minutes later, she stood up, still crying, and left the house. "I really need you here, Davis. Are you my friend or not?" He looked at me with irritation. "Do you think I would have put up with all your antics all these years if I weren't your friend?" "Spare me," he said with a snort. "I just don't see why I need to be here while you talk to Angela." "For luck, maybe," I said. "Remember when Jenny came to the house? It was your idea to be here with me, and thank God you were. I really needed you. So call it a silly superstition, but don't leave, okay? At least stay here for the first few minutes." He sighed with excessive resignation, but I knew he would stay. We watched another half inning, and when the doorbell rang, I turned off the TV and went to answer it. "Hi, Angie." "Hi, Nick," she said shyly. She looked so beautiful that I just wanted to embrace her, but I held back. She was wearing a white skirt and a sleeveless top with a slightly open neckline, very attractive but not at all provocative. Her hair shone beautifully. I knew she wasn't as stunning as Jenny, but I didn't care. She looked amazing. "Hi, Davis," she said, smiling at him as she walked into the living room. He stood up and gave her a quick kiss on the cheek. "Hi, Angie." I asked Davis to stay while we talked, at least for a little while. "Nick, I don't care who hears my apology, I'll say it anyway." "I'm so sorry." I interrupted her. "I know you're sorry. You said it when we talked at your house, and you've said it in how many messages since?" I smiled at her. "So let's talk about what comes after an apology. I'll go first, then you." Angie nodded. "Okay. Number 1, Jenny and I are done. For good, this time. I don't hate her as much as I did before, but I'm never going back to her. Got it?" Angie nodded again, a small smile crossing her face. "So number 2, whatever you and I decide will only involve the two of us. All of Jenny's promises are off the table, she doesn't count. Do you agree?" "Yes, Nick," she said, sounding a little resigned. "Now, number 3, you really hurt me, Angie. After what Jenny did, the last thing I needed was to develop feelings for someone who might let me down. Of course, I understand, Nick, and I'm so ashamed." "Wait, did you say develop feelings?" She looked at me, a smile starting to appear. "Yes," I replied, smiling back. "Do you have a problem with that?" "No, not at all," she said. I glanced at Davis and winked at him. He watched us for another minute, enjoying our smiles, then waved goodbye and headed for the door. I walked over to Angela and gently lifted her to her feet. "In that case, I think you owe me for that interrupted evening." I wanted to tell her about the second time we were together. It felt like making love and not just a physical encounter. We lay together, laughing a little, then stood up. I led her by the hand into the kitchen, where we got out some sausage, bread, cheese, and a bottle of champagne I'd had in the fridge since Jenny left. We went upstairs to my actual bedroom, the one I really slept in. We ate, drank, and laughed again, enjoying that slightly giddy feeling that comes from sharing a bottle of champagne. Afterward, we kissed before talking. "You know, Angie," I said, sitting up in bed propped on 2 pillows while she lay half on top of me, her head on my chest, playing with my hair. "First, we were together, and now we need to talk about what it all meant." She suddenly tugged on my chest hair, laughing as I yelped and pushed her hand away. "Well, I don't think talking about what that meant would take much time, at least for me." "Oh yes?" I said, looking at her. "What that meant to me is that I'm really into you, Nick." I started feeling this way about the 3rd or 4th time we spent together, and the feeling just grew stronger. If it weren't for Jenny and my promise to her, if I only thought about myself, I would have pulled you into bed a long time ago. Now she sat up and looked straight into my eyes. "I don't want to tell you I'm in love with you because I don't want to scare you away, but I will say you mean a lot to me, and I plan to let you know that." She kissed me tenderly, her gaze serious. "Okay, Angie, now it's my turn. I'm really into you too, but I'm also coming out of a pretty painful and destructive relationship, and I might have some trust issues." I playfully nudged her in the ribs, and she playfully swatted my arm. "I understand why you did what you did. Thank goodness you stopped that night and were honest enough to explain everything to me, but it will take me some time, maybe a long time, to feel like I can truly trust you. It probably would have taken a long time anyway after what Jenny did." I paused for a moment. "But that thing about being with me so Jenny can get back at me? Listen, there's something you need to see." I got out of bed and pulled her along with me, hand in hand. We walked down the corridor and stopped in front of the closed door of our old bedroom. And here is a bit of a sanctuary for how bitter and angry I can be. You shouldn't have any illusions about me. I opened the door and motioned for her to step inside, then went back to bed and sat down, waiting for her to return. A few minutes later, Angela came back with a serious expression. Without saying a word, she climbed into bed and snuggled up to me as tightly as she could. "I'm so sorry for what she did to you," she whispered into my shoulder. Then she sat down. "I'm so sorry for what I almost did. It kills me to think that I could have lost you like that." "Well, you didn't," I said roughly, suddenly feeling a lump in my throat. "And if you play your cards right, you won't lose me." I kissed her tenderly. Don't you know that at that moment, damn it, the phone rang. With a silent curse, I picked up the phone. "Hello? Oh, hi Mom. Listen, I can't talk right now, I'll call you back." With Angie's smile, I hung up. What do you think of our story today? In my opinion, the wife in this story is absolutely wrong, because breaking the wedding vows is the worst thing in my opinion. What's your opinion? Write in the comments. See you in the next video.